Now we start the business portion of our meeting. We're going to have a water and wastewater cost of services and rates design study presentation. Before I invite Dave Yankee and Carrie Anderson up, though, I'd like Carrie to start us out.
Well, thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Yes, good to be with you this morning. Our first presentation we're seeing today is it's been, I think, in the works for a couple of years, if I'm being fair. Obviously, dealing with all the water problems, the situations we've had, the commission set forth a process to take a look at our water rates, to make sure that they were consistent with other users, other systems, and then to ultimately find a way to make sure that we could cover the debt. As I've talked to you about over the last 6 months, kind of organizing the pot of money that you've accumulated over the last few years, much of it comes with, it's come with a high debt, right? We're at about a 25% debt to grant ratio right now. And so this study is going to take a look at how we can potentially, make sure that we can keep up with that debt load through the rates. Obviously, we need to be charging the rate that allow us to pay our debts. Otherwise, it's going to have to come from the general fund. Make sure that the process could be fair and transparent to the citizens. I know they've taken on some rates. You guys have done some increases in the past to try to solve some concerns. So, we have, and then I've been kind of in on the tail end. So I kind of added some time. I pushed our team a little bit hard on some items to make sure that we got to the right report. So you're going to have some good information here today. And with that, I'd like to just invite the team, Dave and Carrie up. I'll let them kind of introduce themselves a little farther, and then we'll go over the report, and then we'll have some questions. Mayor, what I would also say today, this item is on the agenda for action. The action is, again, just like with the electrical study, to accept the report. This is their final step within their contract. So by accepting the report allows us to finish the contractual side with our consultants, pay that contract out. And then we would like to move into the same process where we set up some public hearings in the evening. We kind of let the public see what this study is, give you guys time to digest it before we actually make a move to implement it. And then what we ask the consultants to do is really look at it from an implementation standpoint of during our next budget cycle. So we have time to review it, we have time to look at it. And then if we're going to move to this, we would do this in our budget process where we would say, starting July 1st, these would be the new rates and the new structure going forward. So having said that, Mayor, I would ask you bring up the consultant team and we can start right there.
My name is Carrie Anderson with NewGen Strategies and Solutions, and we were retained to conduct a water and wastewater cost of service and rate design study. So through the course of this presentation, I'll take you through the purpose of that study. I'll talk about some things like the scope of work, some of the tasks that we took on. I'll walk through the revenue requirement, what that means, talk about the test year that we put together off of the fiscal year 26 budget and the capital funding requirements associated with that. And then I'll talk about current rates for water and wastewater. Then I'll pass it over to Dave, who will talk about our proposed rates and the bill comparisons under those rates for residential customers. So the purpose of this analysis was to put together a 4-year forecast of the revenue requirement for the operating and capital costs. We looked at that from fiscal year 2026 to fiscal year 2029. As a part of that process, we issued a request for information where we gathered different financial and operating data. And using that, we did a billing analysis to essentially pull the billing units together, which are these like customer counts and consumption. We looked at that and put together a normal test year, which is essentially looking at the rainfall data to put together units that are closest to normal conditions. And then using that, we looked at revenue sufficiency under current rates, and then use that to propose rates that would ensure financial integrity for the utility. So what is a revenue requirement? So that's essentially the revenue that's required by a utility that they must collect through rates in order to cover its operating expenses. So looking at the figure that we have, the revenue requirement takes into account things like the operating and maintenance expenses and any capital needs. So improving infrastructure, obtaining new assets, or anything else that's going to be in the capital improvement plan. So next we put together the test year. A test year is a common term in rate studies that refers to an adjusted fiscal year that can be used as a basis for setting rates. We took the fiscal year 2026 budget and applied different adjustments to it to get it as close to normal as possible. Through conversations with city staff, we put together inflation factors for things like contractual services, electricity, chemicals that will be applied to this test year in order to forecast across that 4-year period. So for water expenses in the 26 budget, we had about 1.9 million. We adjusted out the existing debt since rather than applying those inflation factors, we looked at the actual existing debt and added that into the forecast. We also added in an adjustment for pay-as-you-go, which is $50,000 put away each year into the reserves to plan for future capital needs. So altogether, for the test year, those expenses came out to just over $2 million for water in particular. On the revenue side, it was about 1.8 million in revenues. We adjusted out the 1.7 that could be associated with rates from customers. And so that gave 184,000 in revenues that was also added into the test year. So that net revenue requirement for water was at about 1.8 million. We did a similar thing for wastewater. So starting with the fiscal year 26 budget, about 1.5 million in expenses. And then the existing debt for wastewater was about 78,000. We also were putting away the same amount, $50,000 for pay-as-you-go into the reserves to plan for future capital needs. So expenses came out to about $1.5 million. And then again, for revenues, we adjusted out any of the service revenues that were going to be calculated in our revenue reconciliation of $1.3 million. And so the final wastewater net revenue requirement came out to about $1.4 million. So then next we have the current rates. So under the current rate structure, residential, commercial, and then the Williamsburg customers all have the same minimum bill. And that's regardless of what the meter size is associated with that account. Then there's also a volumetric rate. That's going to be an inclining block rate structure. So for each of the tiers, as you consume more water, that rate goes up. And then there's a single volumetric rate for city landscaping and then effluent water. I would also like to make note that in that minimum bill, 2,000 gallons is currently included for those residential and commercial customers. Next, we have the wastewater rates. For wastewater, for commercial, the volumetric fee is applied to all gallons. It's based on the actual water consumed. For residential, it's based on a winter average. So that's going to be October to January minus the greatest month of consumption. And then that usage is divided by 3. And so that's what the volumetric bills are based off of. Then you have for commercial and residential, it's $14.46 for their minimum bill. And then for the city of Williamsburg, there's $23.98 for their minimum bill. And now on to Dave Youngkin.
Thank you. All right, good morning. Again, for the record, my name's Dave Youngkin. I'm the president of NewGen Strategies and Solutions. So Carrie laid out the revenue requirement and a forecast. So what I'm going to walk through are some different water and wastewater rate scenarios that we developed for you. And then I'm going to walk through and show under each of those different rate scenarios, how much revenue will you recover? And is that sufficient? Or are you going to still be under recovering given some of the debt obligations, et cetera? And so then at the end, I'll provide my recommendations on what we would recommend to you folks. So under your current scenario right now, your status quo, you know, if you do nothing, what you do right now, you have an annual CPI, Consumer Price Index, adjustment of 3% at the beginning of each fiscal year, July 1. So that's your status quo. We developed two other different scenarios then. We designed a scenario that, again, as Gary mentioned, we're starting with any proposed rate increases for fiscal year 2027. So you're into fiscal year 2026. We're not recommending any changes right now. What's nice about this, the changes we would recommend you implement, this gives you time to have discussion, have those meetings. And also one thing I wanted to mention, this is our presentation. We will be providing a report as well in the next couple weeks that once it's reviewed by staff, it'll be finalized. It'll give you more information, the detailed schedules all behind this. So you can look at that as much as you want. It's great if you have sleeping problems, read it before you go to bed and you will sleep great. But in all seriousness, there'll be a lot of information there that we will provide in the written document. So staff has that for going forward, the methodology, assumptions, et cetera. But so under scenario one, what we're going to run a scenario as a 3% annual residential and city increase and a 5% annual increase on the commercial and industrial for those 3 years, fiscal year 27, 28, 29. We also strongly recommend a phase in of the meter equivalent rates. And I have a table on the next slide I'll show you. So I'll just hold that one for now and I'll come back to it, but it's very important. We also would recommend the phase out of the 2,000 gallons of water included in the minimum bill. From a conservation standpoint, across especially the Southwest, and we work throughout the Southwestern United States, water conservation is incredibly important, including 2,000 gallons in the minimum bill is providing what you call free water. Well, as we all know, there's no free water. You've got to pay for it. And so a lot of our clients have eliminated 2,000 gallons. Minimum bill is just for having the hookup and the ability and right to draw water. So we'd recommend that be phased out, and we did that in our rate scenarios. We also went to a standardized or recommended a 1.25 multiplier on outside customer rates for the minimum bill volumetric rates. That is very common and standard in the industry. I've been doing this a long time, going back 30 plus years. There used to be a period where you'd have a 1.5 or 2 times multiplier. Those sometimes got challenged by the at the PUC or Public Utility Commission, depending state jurisdiction. A 1.25 has been found to be very defensible. You're going out into other parts outside city limits. You don't have necessarily density. You have certain additional costs providing. A 1.25 multiplier has been found to be defensible. We also would recommend standardizing all the minimum bills, and we'll show you that in a minute. The second scenario basically includes all those items I just mentioned, but also includes a bigger increase. Instead of a 3% increase to residential, it's a 6% and then an 8% increase on the commercial and industrial. So this is one of the key things we just want to mention. Right now, your minimum bills, regardless of the meter size, you all pay the same. It's the same amount, regardless of meter size. But when you look at meter size, the meter size shows the ability of water to draw down on that meter, and it grows exponentially. You know, it's not like, oh, a 1-inch meter is only 25% more. It's, you know, from an engineering standpoint, it's actually 2.5 more times ability of water to draw. 1.5-inch meter can draw 5 times as much water as a 3/4-inch meter. So it's very common in the industry that your minimum bill is based on a multiplier. So if your minimum bill is $19.50, let's say, for a 3/4-inch meter, the 1-inch meter would be $19 times 2.5. So that would then be, I don't know, about $45 more or less. Now, as you go up, the vast majority of your customers are going to be in the 3/4 to 1.5 inch. When we help clients do this, Carrie and I are actually working with a client in the panhandle of Texas right now, similar size to you folks. They're moving towards this. We always recommend doing it over like a 10-year period because it is a rate adjustment. And so we recommend phasing it in. And so that's what we've done in our analysis here. Some folks will do it over a 5-year period to 10 years. So we've forecasted this over a 10-year period. It is very important in our opinion that you move towards this. This is recommended by the American Water Works Association. That's the National Association for Municipal Utilities. Again, you have to size your water utility, provide water to these customers, whether they use it or not. So if I have a 3-inch meter, the city has to have the infrastructure, storage, water, the ability through water lines to move that water to me. And so if I have the ability to draw down, say on a 3-inch meter, 16 times more water than you can at your residential home, I should help pay for that fixed cost. And so this is a good source of revenue to phase in over time, which we have and is widely done in the industry. It's by far the exception to not do this. So under those 3 scenarios, again, and I'm going to go through at a high level for this. So this is the first scenario. Just if you're doing your 3% annual increase, again, you can see you're under recovering every year. You can see the revenues are the top line. Let's take fiscal year. We'll go to fiscal year 2027. Revenues are shown about $1,688,000. Your revenue requirement is at about $1,976,000. So you're under recovering about $288,000. The only growth in revenues there is due to that 3% CPI adjustment that you have. So you can see your the first line over under shows your annual under recovery, and then the cumulative is the cumulative over that period of time. So the point is, you go to fiscal year 2029, if you only do the 3% increase, kind of your status quo right now, by the end of 2029, you're going to, on a cumulative basis, under recover $1,072,000, that bottom number. So what would you do there? There's only 2 ways to fund that. You take it out of reserves or you cut back on expenses. Utilities are a very fixed cost business, so it's kind of hard to do that. So scenario 1, this gets, again, with the modest increases that we talked about with the 3% residential and 5% commercial. What helps here is the minimum, that meter equivalent. Remember I said phasing in over 10 years, increasing that. So if I've got a meter, a 1.5 inch meter, that's a 2.5 times, I'm phasing in and I'm paying more as I should for that minimum bill. So you see a significant increase in helping to generate those revenues over time, plus a slightly higher volumetric increase for the commercial, so that you see by fiscal year 2029, you're almost breaking even. You lose $12,035. On a cumulative basis, you would have dipped into the reserves $378,000. So a lot better than 1.3 million dipped into the reserves, but you're still losing money. So this goes to our final scenario. And again, this is the scenario, again, where it's a 6% residential rate increase, an 8% increase in commercial, and the minimum bill being phased in. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, in these 2 scenarios, scenario 1 and 2, we also phase out that 2,000 minimum gallon So you start paying for all that water. That's another significant piece that helps with that revenue in scenarios 1 and 2. But you can see under this scenario then, you actually get to a positive cash flow in fiscal year 2028. And by 2029, you have an over recovery. And then cumulative basis, you've only dipped into the reserves by $22,000. So this is the one we would recommend on the water side. One thing I always like to also talk about or mention, some folks will say, well, geez, Dave, by fiscal year 29, you're over recovering $173,000. Can't you just say, hey, we're going to knock 1% instead of doing a 6% and 8% for residential commercial? Could you do a 5% and a 7%? One of the things we like to leave a little margin because you're dealing with Mother Nature here. Carrie touched on it. We spend a lot of time looking at billing data. And so we normalize, and again, you're in a pretty arid environment. It's not like I'm talking to my clients in East Texas, but we normalize for rainfall. And so you want to look at normal consumption and what the needs are. You want to have a little margin of error when you're running a multi-million-dollar utility. Also, we have a lot of clients that are your size, aging infrastructure. You can budget for, and that's where we put pay as you go for reserves. I mean, you can have a pump go out and all of a sudden it's $50,000 you got to come up with, and you may not have budgeted for it. And so this is one of these places where you build some reserves in, it just helps you. So that's the water, and I'm going to go to wastewater next. So the wastewater, be upfront right now, you need more significant rate increases here because you're spending a lot more on the wastewater side to get your treatment plant and things up to compliance. And one thing I want to mention right off, because nobody likes rate increases. I never had a client yet say, hey, thanks for the rate increase. But if you are out of compliance, and we've had clients, we just had a client in Texas, they got sideways. They were discharging effluent that, basically was not clean to standards. You can come under a court order to fix your system. It's cheaper and a lot easier to do this on your own than have the state/federal government looking over your shoulder to do this. Also, you are very fortunate here in New Mexico. You have a significant amount of grant monies, as was mentioned, that you have to do some matching on, but you have a significant amount of, in this case, free money provided to you if you do the increases to do the necessary matching. And so to me, while it's not fun for the rate increases, it's a no-brainer. You got to do this so you get your system up to snuff on your own and you take advantage of those free monies. So with that, I'm going to go into the scenario here. So the first scenario, again, status quo, you have currently a 5% rate increase that takes place effect January 1 of each year. What we would recommend going into the other scenarios is move everything to July 1. It's started fiscal year. It's easy. You're not having to say, I'm only going to get revenues for 6 months or something like that. So we would recommend that. So scenario 1, beginning in fiscal year 27 through 29, a 15% annual increase on the minimum bill and volumetric rates. Again, with those increases taking effect July 1. The second scenario, same thing, but it's a 25% increase each year. Okay. So let's look at this. So again, and I'll go a little quicker on this one. This is your status quo, where you just do a 5% annual increase on January 1. And again, you can see you're losing about 300 grand a year, 600 grand in 2029. So you have a new bond issue coming on. Okay, so you can see bottom line, you're a negative on a cumulative basis, just status quo, about 1.6 million that you're going to have to take out of reserves or cut costs. Under the second scenario, where you had the 15% annual increases, you can see we have a negative under recovery. Let me just check one thing here. There we go. You can see with that, you've got the under recovery. Now, your cumulative under recovery has gone from about 1.6 million to, again, that bottom right quarter, about 735,000. So you're moving in the right direction, but you're still dipping into reserves. So again, with the 25% annual increase in each of those 3 years, you can see you get to a positive cash flow in fiscal year 2028, but you're still dipping into the reserves, 154 grand. In 2029, you have an over recovery and you finally are positive. So one of the things here, we would recommend the implementation of scenario 2. And one key thing I want to mention, and that's the 25% annual increase. Monitoring this going forward into FY 2029, you might not need the full 25%. You might only need about a 15%, but right now, again, we are seeing so much on capital costs where projects are not coming in on budget, they're over budget. What we would recommend, that's 3 years from now. We would recommend you move forward with this. The most critical is getting that first increase at the start of 2027, that 25% increase. And you're going to need it in 2028 as well. And then when you're getting up to the start of FY 29, you can monitor where your revenues are coming in. And you might only need 15%, but I would prepare for the 25% so you're in good shape. So bill comparisons.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please
I
do.
was looking at this bill, but so that's a volume on 6,000 gallons. What is like an average customer? Is that an average customer of 6,000 gallons?
Yeah, we're using 6,000 for a couple reasons, and thank you for the question. So we're using 6,000 gallons for 2 reasons. Number one, there's a state survey put out that within the state that is done at 6,000. So we wanted to keep it apples to apples so you can compare, okay, well, how are we versus some of these other folks? So that's one of the reasons we're using that. Typically, the average bill for a residential customer on the water side for our clients, we typically see anywhere from about 5,000 or 6,000 to about 8,000, 9,000. So your average water bill is usually in, say, that 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 gallon range. And then wastewater is typically more like around 4,500 to 5,500. So it's close.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure when we're looking at these bills and the comparison kind of,
Yeah.
is that what majority of our customers are using?
Yeah, if you're, go ahead. Okay. Yeah, if you're looking at 6,000, that's going to be right in the sweet spot for your customers. So on average bills, and my eyes are starting to fade, so I got to read it. Okay, and so if you look at that on the sample bills, and I'm just going to hit the highlights. So, and again, we're on slide 25 up there. So your average customer right now for a monthly bill, $33.11 at 6,000 gallons, $19.48 on the minimum bill, and then the $13.64. And you can see that goes up 3% a year as, you know, which is current. Scenario 1, you can see we are increasing at a greater rate. You see, if you look under scenario 1, The volumetric charge goes from 1364 to 1756 and then to 2170. That's because we're phasing out to 2,000 gallons and you're paying for it. So that's why you have a bigger increase and why the increase goes up to 13.6%, 12.6%, and then it's at 3%, which is, back to the normal because you're taking away that free water. Scenario 2, it's similar with a slightly bigger increase. Remember that we did that. So you can see that the monthly water bill would go from about $33.11 to $38.72 in 2027, $44 and then $47. And so you've got those increases. One thing I want to mention, so that's your average water bill, basically $47. And so that's over 3 years. That's going to be a $14 per month increase you're looking at. So it's a good amount of an increase. But let me mention something. We're working, again, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I do water, wastewater, and solid waste. We are seeing significant increases on water and wastewater bills for our clients for 2 reasons. Number one, again, folks that have delayed on infrastructure and finally are having to do that. It's interesting on the wastewater side, and we'll get to wastewater, but I have 2 other clients right now that have done wastewater treatment plant expansions. One in the Panhandle, it's Allhart, Texas. It's about 15,000 or so, and they're going to be spending about, with inflation, $37 million on their wastewater treatment plant. A lot of money. We just did a project in Green River, Wyoming, is a town of about 14,000, and they have they're just 30 million for a wastewater treatment plant. I'm going to be down next week in the valley, down near Harlingen in Texas. They're looking at on the water side because they don't have enough water. They're going to brackish groundwater where you have to use membranes and all that to clean the water. They're looking at a 50% rate increase next year. So no one likes rate increases, but you have water, you've got to take care of it. So that's water. On the wastewater side, again, there'll be a bigger increase here because there's more of the costs associated with this. Again, scenario 1 is just the status quo, the 5% increase. So you're at $44.95 right now. That would go to $52.04 by FY29. Scenario 1 again is going up 15% a year. So you would go up to $68.36, and then on scenario 2, it would go up to $87. And so that is a significant increase. But I will tell you, a lot of our clients, you're spending a lot more on wastewater than water because you've got to treat it for proper discharge. There are certain other requirements being put on with regard to PFAS, the forever chemicals, if you've heard about those. And just some of the other treatment requirements. So this is one of these things where you just have to, again, no one likes rate increases, but you've got to get these things fixed and in compliance, or you're going to have the state coming down here on a regular basis. And I'm not bashing the state, and they have that requirement. We've got to have clean water discharges, but it's not cheap. And you just have to do it. With that said, I have clients that their wastewater bills are well over $100 a month. They'd love to look at 3 years out paying $88. So, it's all relative where you live.
Well, thanks for making our morning very depressing.
Well, I will spin it a little bit differently than that. And I say you have a unique opportunity before you to set the city up for the next 30, 40 years with the infrastructure they need. So my undergrad's marketing. MBA in finance, so that's my marketing side, selling. That's everything I have there. There was just a couple things again where some of the meters, because of the age, the city's gonna check and see what sizes. They just have to do a field, go out in the field to see what they are, and then those would be phased in on that over 10 years adjustment. Down the road, I mean, your blocks you have are fine right now, but you may want to look at those down the road. Nothing urgent, maybe in 3-4 years. One of the things we recommend when there's a rate increase is keeping your current block structure so everybody, they see the rate increase and they can follow that. If you start changing your blocks and the rates in the blocks, then it gets a little harder to follow your consumption. So we recommend you just do the rate increases. With that, glad to take any other questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, I'll open it up for questions, discussion.
I have a question, if that's okay. So, based on this, you're projecting out to FY 29 and these rate increases. What are your recommendations? So we get to that point and we're at the high end, that 25% say for wastewater, then are you recommending that we stay that like forever?
So once the rates go up like that, you revisit where you are, and we have a lot of our clients that do this on a 5-year forecast period. I will tell you, I've been doing this a long time. I've had like 3 clients do rate decreases, and then they had to turn around and raise them back up. So your rates will not go down, because one of the things is you've got that debt service tied, and that's going out for an extended period of time. And then bottom line, as your system continues to age, while you're fixing one piece, something else is getting old and breaking. I don't know how many, I'm not an engineer. I don't know how many lift stations you have on the wastewater side, but those are significant when you have to start doing replacements on those and major upgrades. So operating a utility, those rates, what I would say to you is you should, hopefully at that point, then you're just, going along with inflation.
Right.
But that's where you have to see where you're coming in.
Mayor, if I could answer a question on that. So you see, on the wastewater side, I presented a scenario that would say we are going to need to upgrade. I've talked to you a long time about we're going to do some repairs on our system, right? That would get us 5 to 7 years. The vision that I gave them is, tell me how I can get enough revenue to get a loan for $5 million so that we can, in 3 or 4 or 5 years, start planning to renovate the wastewater treatment plant. Okay. So that's what the 25% scenario says. In order to have the revenue enough to borrow $5 million more to renovate it, you're going to need to do this. Now, I'm not going to steal the mayor's thunder. He's going to talk about water trust. So we're trying to do a good job to find these revenues in the grant space, right? So if we can generate and find these revenues over the next 3 years, then we could hypothetically come back and say, we found 4 million, we need $1 million, we can borrow it differently, and the rate could go to 15%, right? And that's what we talked about. Like, so we know on the wastewater side, it's a, go add it as we go to see what we need for debt service. Okay. So that's on that scenario. On the water side with the increase, we put in the current debt of all the projects we have, right? It's about $400,000 a year we have in debt service, and it's not going away. Most of those loans are 40-year loans. So it's not proper for us to say, let's do this increase for 5 years and see where we're at. We owe the money. We borrowed it. We have to pay for it, right? And I just a couple of numbers. So I always want to keep us. It's more than just a rate study, right? You guys have raised a pot of money, right? We're at 75% grant to loan. Right now, we've received $43 million in grant money. That's a value of about $7,000 per resident that you guys have brought in. I'm not going to take the credit. It was here when I got here. So, those are significant dollars that we're not having to charge to fix this system. So keep that in mind, right? So water, it's just really not going to change. We've got to find that balance, and we've got to pay that debt. Wastewater, we have some room to work.
Well, I guess my assumption would be that I guess if we go forward with, I guess I would need to amend I guess the city would need to amend our ordinances, I suppose.
I don't think we looked into the semantics right there. Whatever the rate process is that would allow us during budget, right, whatever that process is, we would have to come forward with that to say these would be the new rates for water and wastewater. And we would take those again back to the scenario I just gave, right? We would say this is maybe this next year because we don't need to borrow, stay at 15% on the wastewater side and then do that, or whatever the commission, whatever the path leads us to.
I guess I was thinking ahead after we get to what you're talking about, that we'd still have to come back and do some work here. I'm thinking, okay.
If I can help answer that. So we have clients, a lot of times what they'll do is, depending where your rates are listed, whether it's in a resolution, ordinance, what have you, what I would envision you doing is you are going to, again, I'm assuming you move forward, what I would recommend is you look at fiscal year 2027 and you're looking at the scenario 2 for the water rate increase, which is the 6 and 8, 5 and 8, 6 and 8, and then 6 and 8% increases. And then I would definitely 100%, you've got to do that 25% on wastewater to start generating those monies. So I would recommend those rate increases for FY27. And then you look at the study again. This is why we provide a report. So literally, Gary, Tracy, they can pull the report out and say, well, what did NewGen say? Oh, fiscal year 28. This is what we're supposed to do. And it's in 29 where, again, on the wastewater side, that's where you want to see where things are coming in. Like Gary said, if some of these things are moving, you might be able to, let's see where the dollars are coming in from a revenue standpoint and a cost standpoint. But I will tell you, you've got to, the first rate increase is always the hardest, but you've got to get that one for 27, fiscal year 27, absolutely. Did that help or answer?
Yes, I would understand. I guess I was only thinking of the mechanics of how we implement something like this. I mean, maybe I'm mistaken. I think we have also our ordinance really set forth what the rates are. I would think we'd have to go back and revise what we have in our books. And,
rates if we get to that point.
yeah, okay. I'm just trying to think really the time frame. Okay.
It's pretty straightforward process.
Any further discussion?
And then there are a couple of key points before I let you go, and you get questions just to remind. So we talked a little bit about reserves, right? You might be saying, do we have reserves? Both water and wastewater are carrying just around $1 million each. You've been able to accumulate dollars based on savings in personnel, right? And that's how, even though we look at these numbers, these are all budget numbers, right? They're not actual numbers. So the savings that you have and the money you're keeping in reserves has come through that process. But we do have about $1 million each in each one of those. And then the last thing for the public and for you, Tracy did a really good job putting the information in about the other systems, right? So you can see that report that Dave spoke of, that's part of the system where you can go see all the systems that look at 6,000 gallons, we can compare, right? And I'll just put on the table, we are in the bottom 25% of rates across the 116 systems in New Mexico. We're in the bottom 25%. There's 116 systems that are higher than us. The average water rate is about $50 across our systems, right? And the mayor, again, I don't know, he'll speak about it, but we were able to sit and listen to a water utility that was asking for money to drill new wells because their average bill is about $275 a month, right? Because they don't have, the wells don't produce, they have to pump, they have to bring water in, and they're paying off that system like $275 per month. And it was pretty sad to hear of the conditions that they're in when they're trying to ask for money. So we're not close to that. We have a reasonable plan. We'll find the right structure.
Okay, don't sit down yet.
You're not done yet, Dave.
Any other commissioners, any other questions?
I was just gonna make a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
On the business sense, when you're laying it out like that, oh my gosh, well, we really need to plan ahead. But for our constituents and for even ourselves, looking at that large of an increase, we're all gonna have a heart attack. So I'm hoping if we move forward on this, we really need to do an outstanding job on getting our community aware of the need, not like we're trying to rip them off, but we have to pay for these things, but
Well, like, and the wastewater, customer 6,000. What about our small businesses that are using, I mean, that's gonna hit
it's gonna be
really, really hard. And I understand the need, we all do, we drive,
we city.
we know, like, we see what needs, and we don't wanna end up where our infrastructure is not getting what it needs because we have pushed off rate increases. So we understand that, it's just very, yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow.
Well, I think like with, the community reaching out to us about our broken water leaks and, infrastructure and disrepair, this is something that is determined to fix it. And they need to be aware that, if we're gonna fix all of this, we're gonna have to have the money to do it. And it has to come from some of it on them,
It's gonna be hard. We're gonna have to work really hard to sell this. And I think just showing the numbers, well, here's the cost. And it's not, we can't wave a wand and say, okay, well, we got the money, but that's gonna be a hard sell.
That's why I brought up the issue about the ordinances, because if we have to go that way, of course, it could be public hearings, et cetera. So
Well,
that's,
I think way
yeah.
before that.
yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Because you had said, workshops and stuff about this.
Absolutely, yeah, we would do what we're doing with it, try to keep that process going where we, bring the public in, we just put it on the table so that
Right.
you guys can make the best decision, right?
Show them the numbers. I mean, if you just look at the black and white of numbers.
Well, if I look at this and the way I think about it is that, these are what the numbers are gonna be if I'm not gonna call it status quo, but if we don't do anything,
Right.
right? If we're not aggressive. We have to be aggressive in going out and finding money. We have to be aggressive in trying to retire our debt. We have to be aggressive in trying to figure out how we're gonna fund that sewer plant. And we're doing that, and we will continue to do that. So, and there's a couple of things that probably aren't factored into the system. For instance, aren't we in the middle of kind of a meter replacement scenario? And I don't know how that's gonna affect our final bills. I don't think in many cases, the bills are gonna go down. I think because of the efficiency of the meters, some people's bills are gonna go up, and that's gonna have a negligible effect, but it's gonna have an effect, right?
Typically, when you do a meter changeout program, meters, when they are old, they underreport. Rarely do they overreport.
Right.
So you're gonna start paying for some of that water you weren't.
Yeah, so that'll have a somewhat of an impact. Another impact I'm looking at is, well, we're just going through the process of replacing 35,000 linear feet of water lines in the Veeder Street area. That'll happen, in the next couple of years. I know that's on the city side, but we have to pump the water there that we're losing now. So that should also have an effect on the final bill that we incur. Is that correct?
It should, I don't know.
We lose about 20 to 40% of our water through leakage in the.
Yeah, that's a high number, so it should reduce your lost and unaccounted for water. If that's a problem area for line breaks, that should definitely help there.
Right. So that'll help a little bit. So, we're starting to chip away at it a little bit. The next thing I think I'd like to propose is that we have an opportunity at the end of this month to talk to our Legislative Finance Committee. And we've got our 5 projects that we're going to talk about. But one of the things we should talk about in general is the small communities in the state that are having to deal with these infrastructure problems. And when we have success, for instance, we're very successful in getting water support from the state, and we've got $43 million coming to our state, but each component comes with a grant opportunity, but it also comes with a loan or a match. And it gets to the point where we're looking at, we can't afford to ask for another grant because we don't know if we can afford the match component or the loan component because we're getting leveraged out. And so I think it behooves us and every one of us to talk to our legislators and say, let's do something for relief for our small communities. Instead of, let's work on some debt relief and retiring some of this debt for our small communities so we can ask for things.
Right.
And so that we can move forward. And that would have a huge impact on us too. And I think we'll try to do that. We'll put something together this I think it's the end of this month, we meet with the LFC. So we'll try to do that. So those are a couple of scenarios I think that we can work on to try to mitigate some of those issues.
And we have been going up in our rates. correct? In 23, I think we went up 9% and then 3% after, and then for wastewater, it was 5% or something. So, I mean,
Yeah, we have. And that's what we were thinking at the time, though, that's gonna keep us up,
Right.
right? And that's why we went up with those rates, but we know that's not true. But what we've also painted was the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is that, well, we may have to go borrow $5 million to meet our sewer plant. Well, if we can mitigate that with funding from other sources, we don't have to borrow $5 million, and we'll work diligently to try to do that. And I think I'll save that for my report. When it's time to give our reports, I'll talk a little bit about what efforts we're doing in that regard. So yeah, this paints a picture. I'll tell you what, it's an eye opener.
Yeah.
It should be an eye opener for everybody. But we have to assure our public that we're going to do whatever we can to keep the rates down as much as possible. We have to be able to function as a business.
Right.
And so we have to move forward. We may have to make some adjustments, but we're going to do everything we can to keep those adjustments minimal. And we'll look at it very, very closely to ensure that, we're not saving too much money. I mean, I want to try to break even as much as we can. I know we have to have some reserves. We'll work on that. But we need to, save as many dollars as we can for our public as possible to make this as efficient as possible.
Well said.
Okay.